Good morning and welcome to Psalm a Day. My name is Evan. I'm one of the ministers at St Mary's Anglican Church. And today for Psalm a Day, we're looking at Psalm 82. And it's going to be a bit hairy because there's a very, very interesting verse in Psalm 82. How about we read it together to start off? A Psalm of Asaph. God presides in the great assembly. He gives judgment among the gods. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They know nothing. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere men, and you will fall like every other ruler. Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all your nations are your inheritance. So, did you see it? Did you see the interesting bit? In particular, verse 6, you are gods. And who's the psalmist referring to there? Well, the psalmist is referring to people. And so this is the dilemma that we are presented in this psalm. How do we understand this psalm? How do we understand people as being gods? Is a very interesting dilemma. And it's one that Jesus will actually quote in John chapter 10. Personally, this is one of the most confusing parts of the Bible for me. But of course, with a lot of things that are confusing, especially when it comes to the Bible, all you need to do is talk to someone or do some reading and you can uncover their answers quick enough. And so take this passage, for example, you are gods. So what do we learn from this? I think the first thing we have to try and understand is who is speaking in the passage. It could be either the psalmist or God in verses 2 through 5. And I don't think it really matters because they're saying the same thing they're saying one thing to one particular group of people. Now, we're a bit, when I say we, I mean our scholarship is a little bit unsure as to who this group of people are. Maybe they are judges, or maybe they are Israel, maybe they're just people in general. But all of those are people. And so when verse 6 says, you are gods, the psalmist is saying that at some point we are similar to God. And we can take a couple of things away from this. The first thing we can take away is that we are not like the rest of creation. We are set apart from creation. Genesis makes that very clear. God's plan makes that very clear. And so when people might say that, we're just another animal, according to the Bible and according to God, that's not strictly true. In fact, that's false. Well, what makes us like God? How can we be like God? He's so high above us. He's so powerful. He's so mighty. How can we possibly be like him? Well, yes, there are what we will call incommunicable attributes, the things that God does that we can't do. But there are also communicable attributes that are things that God does that we can do as well. God is truth, and we are capable of telling truth. God is love, and we are capable of loving. God speaks, he communicates, and so we can also speak and communicate. God reasons, is logic, and so we can also reason and we also have logic. So there's actually quite a few ways in which God gives us things that are his attributes, and so we are like God in that way. And so when we come to this passage, we shouldn't be surprised that the psalmist says, actually, you are gods. In fact, let's think about Genesis. You were made to rule over God's creation. You are God's envoys. You are God's ambassadors. And so it would make sense that you have these things. But in the context of the psalm, the people who are the gods have failed to do that. They've been given the gifts, they've been given the power, but have failed to orchestrate the duties of their office. And that's maybe why a reading of this text can sort of it makes a bit more sense if we're talking about rulers of a people, or even if we're talking about Israel, who's supposed to be, back in Exodus chapter 19 verse 6, they're meant to be God's priests, his kingdom of priests to the whole world, his representatives to the whole world. But those who are the gods have failed to do that. And so they will die like mere men, like every other man. It's a very interesting passage. And Jesus will use, like I said before, he will use this further on in John 10 to actually say that, there are bits of the Bible that say that, man is like God. It's very interesting, isn't it, to say things like that we are like God. And I think that points back to the love that God has for us. He gives us wonderful gifts, things that we can do, things that we can use for his glory and for the encouragement of those around us. But a lot of those things can be used to sin and to degrade our relationship with him, to betray him, and also to degrade our relationship with those around us. And so here's a little takeaway for you today. You are like God. You are God's ambassador. You are God's representative. Are you living that way? Are you speaking that way? Are you thinking that way? Are you doing the things you do that way? Are you proclaiming the gospel? Are you, with your family, spending time in his word? Before him, do you spend time in the word yourself and praying with him? Are you a true ambassador of God, or are we fake envoys? Are we false gods? Are we figures who point people away from God rather than to him? And so you are like God. Be like him. Live like him. Love like him. Grace and peace to you.